I would move
Welcome to Monos Pod, episode 4 with Tino and Matt. What's up, Matt?
Hey, how's it going?
It's good, man. This is take two. We won't talk about take one. Uh, so on this pod, we're going to talk about our 1 through 50 uh, dynasty prospects heading into 2023. The previous episode was 51 through 100. We'll follow the same format where we'll both share for like 50 through 41 and then talk about each prospect a little bit and chime in. What's going on, man? What's new?
Very good. Very good. I'm excited about season coming around. January is when a lot of content comes out, a lot of the good stuff.
Are you working on any projects right now, fantasy wise?
Yeah, I'm doing my draft board for the league. So I'm really excited about that. I've never done a detailed draft board with analytics and stuff. So
We can tell
so
by your teams.
yeah. I usually don't have stuff to do in December anyway, because I'm a Browns fan. That usually
Right.
happens a lot earlier, but yeah, so I'm really excited about that. Plus my team, I rebuilt with a lot of prospects, and a lot of my prospects are coming up now. So I could actually concentrate on getting a very balanced team this year.
It's awesome.
So
I'm all
yeah, so this will be fun. I'm gonna laminate it into a Denny's menu when we go to spring break. Everybody makes fun of Stefanski at the Cleveland coach. They call his play sheet a Denny's menu.
right,
He has his face in that. He's not paying attention to the players, but I
right.
kind of like it. I like those laminated sheets.
That's funny. I used to do that for football. Kind
Hmm.
of like the Andy Reid foldable sheet. I
Oh
would
yeah,
I
you
would
would
go
do
to
that for
King
football
King
draft?
yeah, go to Kinko's or whatever and have it laminated, and everyone made fun of me, but I thought it was fun because I could use dry erase and I could look at scenarios and stuff like that. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
So.
gonna be great. It's gonna
Hmm.
be great. All right. So just to review, like I said, we went 51 through 100, talked about each prospect a bit, gave our 2 cents. We're going to do the same thing for 1 through 50, starting with 50. Did you mix since it's been a little bit since we went through 51 through 100, have you changed your lists much
A little
since
bit
then?
within each of the 50s. I would move, next time we do this, I would move some around. I would move some
Mhm.
up. There's some I want to drop off this board.
Sure.
Players like Wilmer Flores that would want to move up. Maybe Mervis, who I had down there, would want to move up, and Fat maybe move up from
Cool.
Arizona. Brandon Fat, fought
It's,
Fat.
I
I
think
don't
it's
know.
fat.
It's fought, right? I don't
I
know.
think it's funny.
But yeah, so and there's players, that we'll mention in a second that I would probably want to move down.
Awesome. Well, and if there are players that you would move since we made the list, up or down, feel free to share that too. Obviously, you won't have an exact number, but there are some players that, looking back, so we made this list about a month ago, and there's some players on my top 50 that I think I would move a bit. Kind of since reading and watching a little bit more tape, I might move up or down a bit. So with that, let's get started. Why don't you start by sharing your 50 through 41, and I'll stop you if there are players that I want to talk about.
Okay, at 50, I have Zach Veen. At 49, I have Colton Cowser. At 48, I have Robert Hassel. At 47, I have Diego Cartaya. At 46, Elijah Green. Here's one I did move up. Ken Waldachuk, I moved to 45. He was in my list from 51 to 100.
Mhm.
Um, Cody Morris at 44. Cade Cavalli at 43, Michael Bush at 42, Miguel Vargas, who has dropped quite a bit, at 41.
So, all right, let's start with. So I have Veen in this range as well. I have Cartaya and Kauser in this range as well. What is it? Let's talk first about Waldachuk and Vargas and the reason for you moving them from these 10 moving forward.
Yeah, I like after digging deeper into Waldachuk, I just love his makeup, the quality of pitches. He has a wide array. I like his ratios with walks to Ks. He probably will be under, easily under 10% with walks. I think I could see him getting about 25% with Ks. It's kind of the cutoff for me. Already, doesn't give up tons of home runs, and that's going to help in the home run park. He's under 3% home run rate. And I like his makeup. I like the bigger pitchers. He's 6'4", 220.
Mhm.
I think he could be an innings eater there in Oakland, with skill too. So
Right.
he may continue to move up. He's definitely up on my draft board. And I think he's a great deal this year, even for non-keeper leagues.
Mhm.
Can eat innings, give you great ratios. He's not going to give you wins, but that's just to me, that's a secondary category as opposed to skills.
Right. And it's a category that is majority of it is luck, right? So you could pitch for so it's left-handed pitcher for the A's, 6'4", was traded from New York Yankees to the A's, obviously, but we look at wins as obviously it's category for us, but he could conceivably win 13 games in Oakland, right? Or he could have won 8 games pitching the same for the Yankees. It's just very wins is a category of luck. And so while you need to take organization into account when thinking about wins, I think it's probably at the bottom of the rankings as far as importance with regards to categories, as far as us being able to predict them. You're right. He had 110 strikeouts in 77 innings last year, 1.14 or WHIP. Um, he's got that same sort of profile as a lot of the young starters coming up, very similar to Harrison in that it's elevating with the fastball, kind of up and outside to right-handed hitters, and then a sweeper slider type pitch down at the back foot. That's kind of his bread and butter. He's got a third pitch, but I agree. I think he's going to go probably to you or I. I think we value him the highest in our league. I love what Oakland can do with even middling left-handed starters, right? You look at like Cole Irwin, players or pitchers like or Cole Irvin, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting football and baseball mixed up. Pitchers like they're obviously targeting left-handed starters, Kyle Mueller, and they're targeting left-handed starters who aren't valued in the same way by other organizations. And so I think that Waldichuk is the best of that group, has the best stuff of that group, has the best strikeout stuff of that group, and I think he will be the ace of that staff by the end of 2023. He actually is at number 27 for me, so I have him even higher than you do.
Then he'll get traded.
Right, exactly, for 3 more prospects.
Yeah.
Why are you a little bit down on Vargas? You were kind of high man on Vargas as we coming into 22.
Yeah, so I rostered him for a couple years. I like his makeup as far as hits, even with hard hits. But I just don't see him. If you're gonna be in the top 20, 25, I want to see somebody that has elite ceiling. I think he's a very safe floor player at third. Great organization. I don't see his power developing. I think there was a lot of optimism last year with his power coming up, but it kind of rounded off last year when it comes to his, the power he could provide a team. Even like Forecaster has him just a little below average this year when it comes to projecting his power numbers. And for a corner infield prospect, I just want a little more power than that.
So does it change your feeling about him if he becomes a full-time second baseman?
Totally, yes. If he becomes a full-time second baseman, that will give you a head up on other players. But I'm always looking for position players in a head-to-head league that are going to be consistently better than other teams' players. And I don't see him doing that at third, but I could see him doing that at second.
So where how far does he move up if he's a second baseman and not a third baseman for you?
he would be in the top 25 for me if he's.
So I do have him at 23. I think his floor is kind of a younger, slightly better Yuli Gurriel because he makes really good contact, and his walks and Ks are pretty much even. He does have a little bit of speed, at least on the base paths as well. He's not a super fast player, but he's got the ability to steal some bags. And I think he walks a little more than Gurriel, but he's got the kind of back control that I think is reminiscent of that. So I actually I agree that he's a very high floor player, and I think he's going to hit for a pretty good average unless he starts to really sell out for power. But I do think that there's 20 to 25 home runs in his bat. And so when you start looking fantasy wise, you start looking at either second or third base for me. If you're talking 290, 300 and 20 to 25 home runs in an above average offense with the ability to steal 10 bases as well, that's not that far away from Manny Machado. And Machado is my number one ranked third baseman. So I think that there is more ceiling than people are giving him credit for. The other thing that comes to mind is I think we're starting to evaluate, or I'm starting to evaluate some of the hitter metrics a little differently, right? So you look at a player like, think about Bregman or think about Simeon, right? They're able to place their fly balls in certain areas of the park. And so both for the two of them, all of their fly balls end up down the left field line, which is why they can have poor hard hit numbers or poor barrel numbers, but still end up with 30 home runs, or in Simeon's case, 45 home runs one year. Not that Vargas is that pull happy or that kind of player, but my point is that he doesn't always hit the ball quite as hard as some of the other players do. He doesn't have the same level of athleticism, I think, as some of the other elite talents do that we rank in the top 25. But I think he has some of the other skills to get there. So for me,
he has a solid launch too, and
right.
his hard hit isn't it's just not elite, but it's not bad, right?
Right.
So he's at 32, and a comparable player like Miranda last year in the minors was under 30 with hard hit. So
I do put him, if we're putting him and Miranda side by side, I'm not saying this because you roster Miranda, although I typically would. I do think he's a better talent and a better player. To me, he's a slightly a notch, probably a half grade higher with the hit tool, and probably half grade higher with power as well, with power as well. I'd love to have Vargas, honestly, third or second base. I think he's a talent, and I also think the Dodgers believe in him, which says something to me. I try not to be so bought into organization, but the Dodgers are willing to pencil him in for, say, 450 at bats next year, and let players like Bellinger go, which moves at bats elsewhere. I'll trust them and roll with Vargas.
He could be the type of player that is going to give you multiple positions too. They could plug him around he could be first, second, and third base eligible next year. So that would increase his value as well.
Absolutely. So two more players to talk about, and then I'll move to mine. Diego Cartaya, staying with the Dodgers. You have him at, I think, would you say 43 or 44, something like that?
I have him at 47.
Okay. So he's at 41 for me. He's a player that's kind of I would say has a down arrow for me, only because I don't know that we're not assured that his hit tool is gonna be average. And so our ability to acquire in Dynasty catchers that hit 20 to 25 home runs with low average it's pretty easy to find those types of hitters. So what's going to differentiate a catcher is going to be, can they reach the 30 home run threshold, and is their average going to be over, let's say, 250 or 260? It's what makes Rutschman different, right? It's what makes Alvarez potentially different. So Cartaya, there is questions about his hit tool. He struck out 119 times in 362 at bats and low and high A last year as a 21-year-old. What is it?
And I think his value is exaggerated because he can be a top defensive catcher, right?
Mm.
So if you look on scouting boards, Baseball America, Prospectus, his value is upped because of that defense. So he drops on mine because of that, because we're just looking at what he could offer as a fantasy catcher to offense here.
Right.
Yeah, and I've been looking a lot at players in the last 10 years and looking at their strikeout rates in the minors. His contact rate was 67% in, like you said, the low minors. That's scary for me. There's
Right.
not too many players that are under 70 that succeed as hitters in MLB. As they move up. Even somebody that struggled like Cruz initially last year, his contact rate was above 70. I think at some point it was in the mid 70s.
Right.
So that's a big question mark for me when it comes to Cartaya.
He's ranked this high, despite those things. He's ranked this high for me because I think his, pipeline originally had his power as a 60. I would put it closer to a 65 or a 70 at this point. I think he's shown that he's got tremendous power. He also takes a ton of walks, which can mitigate the low average, but does not change the fact that if the hit tool is below average, he might not get to the power, right? So he has 30 home run potential. I don't know that he'll get there. My ranking says I see him more as a 20 to 25 home run guy with, a high OBP and a low average. The last thing with him is, they currently have a top 3 catcher in Will Smith. And so if Cartaya has a huge year and he stays in the Dodgers organization, they don't use him as trade bait, then, where's he going to play? So I don't know. I think I would probably drop him if I did the rankings right now, another 20 spots or so, because of the questions about the hit tool and the organizational, or being blocked within the organization.
It'd be interesting what they do with him at trade deadline.
Yeah. Especially if he has a good year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Colton Cowser is another one. He's at 42 for me. What would you drop Cowser as of right now from your top 50 if you were to redo your list?
I probably would. I'm a wait and see when it comes to his power. I know a lot are counting on that power developing, and there were hints of it in AA, right? He went on that huge streak last year in AA. But again, he's one of these players that have the sub 70 contact rate. He's at 66% contact rate last year. Forecaster has him at above average power. He is decent in hard hit, but his slug wasn't that impressive in minors last year. It was 470. And with an outfielder versus like a corner infielder or catcher at a scarcer position, I want something more there. So he may be in a strong lineup with that walk rate. He's 15% walk rate. He's got a great eye. That may be a value. His speed is just average. So again, that's not going to give me a head up on other players in the outfield when it comes to stolen bases, runs, and so forth.
So if we I have Cowser. So let's do this exercise. Within 41 through 50, I have Cowser, Alexander Canario, the outfielder for the Cubs, Jason Dominguez, outfielder for the Yankees, Evan Carter, outfielder for Texas, and Zach Veen, outfielder for Colorado. I have all of them within 41 through 50. I bring it up because, Cowser had 19 home runs, 18 steals. Canario had 37 home runs, 23 steals. Dominguez had 16 home runs, 37 steals. Carter had 12 home runs, 28 steals, and Veen had 12 home runs, 55 steals. So we're talking about power speed guys, right? And if I was to redo this list, I'd probably put Evan Carter at the top of that list. Mostly because he didn't strike out a ton compared to the others, right? Cowser's, had a 406 OBP last season in the minors in high AA and AAA, which is obviously great. But he also struck out 174 times. And if he doesn't demonstrate, and he had 19 home runs and 510 at-bats. If he doesn't demonstrate real power in Baltimore quickly, he's not going to walk. as nearly as much because pitchers aren't going to be afraid of him hitting it out. And so they're just going to pump strikes and say, you're not strong enough to do damage. So I'm not worried about walking, or I'm not worried about throwing pitches over the plate, right? We see that over and over again with high OBP guys that don't have power. So, or can't do damage. Whereas a player like Evan Carter it struck out 81 times in 397 plate appearance or at bats last year. And so he's demonstrated the ability to do some damage, and he's got better bat to ball. And so that's one thing, when I start to dissect the numbers and look at their swings, I'll take a player like that all day over the player with the high strikeout, because I don't know that you're going to change his strikeout rate all that much once he makes it to the major leagues. Veen and Carter are very similar for me. I like Carter better. I think the floor is higher with Evan Carter. The ceiling is probably pretty similar. They're both 20 years old. They're both had a taste of Double-A last year. Do you have an opinion on? Go ahead.
Veen is a big question mark for me as far as what happened last year to him. He's kind of like the Brady House, right? He's supposed to have this power, and he slugged under 400, 384 slug, right? He has that eye, he has the steals, he makes better contact than Cowser. But what about the quality of contact, and is that power going to develop just because of his frame? What is he? He's
6'4".
6'4", yeah.
I don't know.
Is Colorado going to develop that power, right?
Well, that's the other question, right? I don't know that I love the Texas developmental system either all that much for hitters, but I know that I don't love the Colorado system, right? Ezekiel Tovar is a great prospect despite the Colorado system. I did bring up Jason Dominguez. I don't really know what to think of him yet. He's 19 years old. He's a great athlete, super high risk switch hitter, had an absolute bomb of a home run in the futures game. But he also struck out 128 times in 451 plate appearance or at bats last year. I think he was more hyped than anything. If he's fantasy wise, I think his ceiling is probably outfield 2, and he'd be lucky to reach that. The other one is Alexander Canario, and I really don't know what to make of his stats. But I have him at 43. So he's 22, Cubs organization. He hit 37 home runs in 464 at bats with 23 steals, but his triple slash was 252, 343, and an 899 OPS. Did you rank Canario in 51 through 100? I don't remember.
No, I did not. I don't think.
Do you have an opinion of Alexander Canario at all?
It's a wait and see for me, right? But I think he's one of those that could jump up the boards, right? And especially talking about organizations, I really like what the Cubs are doing with their prospect, right? Even what they've done with Mervis, kind of probably would have been a 7th round, 6th round first baseman during the COVID year, but how he's developed has been impressive, and they seem to do that with a lot of hitters that are kind of not like the elite prospects, but then they Morale is came out of nowhere as well, and what they did with him, the kind of confidence in bringing him up to play last year was interesting as well. So so
I think the timing is right with Canario too, because he's if he's able to hit for that kind of power, and they're not quite ready to contend yet in Chicago, I think that we might see him play in a corner mid-season or late in the season. And if he pops similarly to Morel, not that Morel popped, but he played better than I think we thought he would. He's got the type of power and athleticism to make a real fantasy impact. I also think that there's potential there for him to be a better fantasy player than a real life player. Because I'll take a 250, 260 guy if he's going to hit 30 home runs and steal 20 bases. And that may not be an absolute superstar at the major league level, but as an outfield 3 in fantasy, or even low end outfield 2, you'll take the 30 home runs and 20 steals. So I like his upside. He might not have the same career as a Cowser or a Carter or a Veen, but he could potentially have a greater peak or peak year. So the others, my 40, so 41 through 50 or 50 through 41 for me was Bo Naylor, catcher for Cleveland, Zach Veen, Evan Carter. I have Logan O'Hoppe as my 47. He's the catcher that was traded from the Phillies to the Angels. Uh, so the controversial one, the hot take for me is at 46. I ranked Bryce Miller, the right-handed pitcher for the Seattle Mariners. He was in low A, high A, and double A last year. He's 24 years old. He's a third round pick, I believe, out of Texas A&M. I saw him live, and I'm trying not to let that influence me too much. But I saw him live in Tri-Cities when Everett came to Tri-Cities. Noelvi Marte was still a Mariners prospect at that time. I miss Noelvi Marte. But Bryce Miller was absolutely electric. It was one of those where maybe I caught him on a great day, but and this is, I know it's like cliche or the cool thing to do is to compare a pitcher to Spencer Strider, but that's what he was. He was high 90s fast rising fastball and a wipeout slider, and they could not touch him. Last year, within from low A to double A, he had 133 and 2/3 innings, 93 hits, 46 walks, and 163 strikeouts with a 1.04 whip. So it's pretty clear that the fastball slider are there. And the Mariners have the ability to teach a third pitch. So part of my ranking him there is, obviously I'll be the high person on him. Most top 100s may not even have Bryce Miller there, but we've seen pitchers be able to dominate with fastball slider. And I think that the proximity, in part because of his age, that he could be the Mariners' fifth starter pretty quickly and have a big strikeout impact on the Mariners. The other part of it is the Mariners pitch in a huge park.
Mm-hmm.
Super.
You have him above Hancock on your board?
100%, I do. So some of the starting pitchers I have them above: Dylan Lesko, Gavin Stone, Max Meyer. Hancock is 66. Bryce Miller is 46 for me. Brandon Barreria, Tink Hence, Hunter Brown, Bobby Miller, Noah Schultz. Those are the pitchers below. Wilmer Flores, Jack Leiter, Jackson Jobe, Cade Cavalli. But yeah, I would keep an eye on him. I'm not going to raise him anymore as of right now, but could he be like Matt Brash, but actually stick in the rotation? I think there's that potential. And I do think that if he has the opportunity, he is potentially a 180 to 200 strikeout pitcher, right? And that's worth a ton in fantasy. His ceiling may be a number 3 in the majors, but his ceiling may be a little bit higher fantasy wise.
Mm-hmm. I love what the Mariners are doing. I like that they didn't make any major trades this year with the prospects. They're building these prospects, especially the pitchers. I was just looking at this last night, just in contrast with the Braves, right? The Braves raided their entire system. They even had a top prospect they traded for Jimenez the other day to Detroit, right?
Right.
But I like the philosophy as far as kind of the tangential filler players are the players that they're signing as free agents, right? And they're making trades only for players that are going to fill in and kind of be kind of next step towards the core. But the solid core of the Mariners is their minor system.
Right. Well, so currently on roster resource, we've got Luis Castillo, Logan Gilbert, Robbie Ray, George Kirby, and Marco Gonzalez as their top 5. They've talked about trading Gonzalez this offseason. And then Chris Flexen is also there as a long reliever. So he's obviously a minor, kind of a number, like a swing guy. And then in the minors, so Taylor Dollard is one, Emerson Hancock is another, Bryce Miller is another. Those are kind of the 4 that you could see come up. Hancock, I think, would probably get the call first, although I wouldn't be surprised to see them trade 1 or 2 of those guys for a bat. But again, just seeing Bryce Miller in person, that fastball slider combination was absolutely dynamite, and I could not ignore it. The other player to discuss here real quickly is Francisco Alvarez. I have him at 45. I think we've talked about it. We've talked about it ad nauseum, why you're a little bit higher than I am on him. I just see a bad body. and a guy that can't run and a guy that may not stick at catcher for very long. I do like his hit tool. I do love his power. But he's not elite for me, at least not yet. What's your counter to that?
Um, my counter to that is just the not yet. I think he out of all this is a great. These next couple of years are great years to invest in catchers, right? Especially in keeper dynasty leagues. I think he does have the highest ceiling of catchers. Maybe the closest would be Ford, just because Ford is going to balance across the board there. But I just like that ceiling aspect. I like that, there are issues as far as, relative age, right? He's young, but he's already kind of filled out, but still he's, when it comes to young and experience, compare him to Cartaya, right? Same age, but Alvarez is doing better in AAA than what Cartaya was doing in single or AA, right? So I like that aspect. I think his batted balls in play was really low last year. He had that ankle issue, so I'm not going to evaluate his hit based upon when he went to AAA. But his hard hit rate is elite when it comes to the minor leaguers on this list.
I would argue that his things like his BABIP were low, not because of injury, but because he was literally the slowest guy I think I've ever seen on the base.
That's gonna affect it as well, but
he's really slow.
But it is but his ankle was really an issue at the end of last year.
That's because he has probably a gout. Joking, but that's the way he looks to me. He's
I'm not going to make a comment on body types.
5'10", 233. What I will say for him though is he did have a very high pull rate last year. I think it was near 50%, I believe. And I know that people have talked a lot about left-handed hitters being more impacted by the shift rules than right-handed hitters. But Alvarez is one of those players who I think will benefit from the new shift rules. So I don't know. I currently have Cartaya 4 spots above him. I do think Cartaya's power ceiling is higher. And I think you have to wait on it. And I think the percentage, if you were to put a percentage on whether they're going to reach their peak, I would put a higher percentage on Alvarez than Cartaya. But I can't get over the questions about him sticking at catcher and the kind of the lack of athleticism that I see in Francisco Alvarez currently. He, doesn't mean he's not going to have a good career, but if you move his skill set to first base instead or to DH instead, is he still an elite player or is he just another DH or just another first baseman?
We'll see what the Mets do with trading McCann. It seems like they'll DH Alvarez and play some catcher, and then Narvaez being the starter and kind of being the Obi-Wan as far as teaching
Alvarez. Yeah. I do think that was smart to pick up Alvarez. And then they also have Tomas Nido still as well. Real quickly, we've got about a minute before our break. Logan O'Hoppe is the other one to talk about here. I have him at 47. Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim picked him up in a trade. He's 22 years old. He did have 26 home runs last year in Double-A. Triple slash of 283, 416, 960. I like him. I think if I was to put this list together again, he'd be above all these guys. Part of it is proximity, and part of it is I just think he's got talent. Is he a worthwhile investment when you have so many catchers who are coming up and able to hit 20 home runs? I don't know, but I do like him a lot. You have him
as far as star appeal, he's kind of like you have Gary Carter and then you have the Lance Parrish, right? He's kind of like the under the radar Lance Parrish guy, right?
Right.
In my dynasty league, I have O'Hoppe, Cartaya, and Alvarez, and it's kind of like I'm putting my 3 stocks out there, and I like having those 3 together because they're, one of them is going to succeed
for sure.
There's always a risk with catchers with injury and so forth. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. But I have Ford in the next grouping, who I really like as well.
Me too. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back with our 31 through 40. 40 through 31. Matt, what you got?
All right. Let me pull this up here. Okay, at 40, I have Gavin Williams. 39, I have Bobby Miller, pitcher for the Dodgers. 38, I have Taj Bradley, pitcher for Tampa. And then 37, this is somebody who fell a little bit. Is it Beatty or Batty?
Beatty.
I have Beatty at 37. I have Harry Ford at 36. I had Mason Wynn at 35. Tink Hence, somebody I really like at 34. I could see him jumping up the board. And this is one that I could see in the top 10 at the end of the year, Emmanuel Rodriguez. If he didn't get hurt, I think he'd be higher. I have Marte at 32. And then I have Cam Collier, who I could see rising after his first full year of minors up the board quite a bit as well.
Did you downgrade those two because they are two favorites of mine, or are they
Marte's been downgraded just because I see the potential there. I just don't see the performance yet. But Collier, for me, first year players, that's pretty high at 31.
Sure. I agree. I'm flipping you shit. So of those guys, I've got Ford at 39. We can talk about him a little bit. I've got Beatty at 26, but I think that'll change given what the Mets are doing at third base. Taj Bradley at 25, Gavin Williams at 28. So we're kind of in the same range with a lot of those players. Let's start with Harry Ford and talk about why we both have him within, like, in the top 40 prospects in Dynasty baseball.
Yeah, so Ford already showing what he could do at the plate when it comes to discipline. Last year, in some, he had 18% walk rate. His contact rate is over 70%. He's fast. He's kind of one of these true 5-category catchers, right? Varsho is kind of linked there, but I see Varsho as, some people say Ford is the poor man's Varsho. I see it the other way around. Varsho definitely is the poor man's Harry Ford.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see him still. I could see him sticking there with the M's, maybe not being completely full time at catcher. He can move around, so he'd be an interesting player, kind of like Melendez was last year. He has outfield and catcher eligibility this year. I could see the same thing with Harry Ford, but the more athleticism there. So yeah, I like him a lot. He's a great investment. He should be rostered as a keeper, or in our league at least by the end of this year. So yeah, so I have him outside of Alvarez as the next highest catcher.
It's interesting because I've heard the same, like, or similar comps as far as Varsho. I think he's got a lot of Real Muto too. Maybe not in style, but in statistics, right? I think Real Muto is the one that I think of. I don't know that Ford has 25-30 steal capability, but I do think he's got 15-20. I love the ability to draw walks. I think that's always been something for me that's prioritized. And he had 88 walks and 390 at bats last year and 115 strikeouts. And you can live with the strikeouts if you know that he's being that selective. I haven't seen his swing percentage, but I wonder if is he drawing the walks because he just doesn't lift the bat and he takes a lot of third strikes, or is he a little more aggressive and just sees the ball that well? That part I don't know yet, but yeah, especially if he has multi-positional eligibility, it would be an incredibly valuable catcher. And he also, so strategically speaking, having a catcher like Ford, if you can count on 15 steals, 20 steals, allows you to take a player like Correa, if Correa was still a shortstop, and who is void of steals but provides you every other category, allows you to do that, right, when you're building a team out. So I don't know. I love Ford. I'm excited he's a Mariners prospect. He's probably the #1 Mariners prospect as of right now. I do think that there's competition with Lazaro Montes, but yeah, Harry Ford's great. And if he's not rostered by someone mid 23, late 23, I'll pick him up as one of my 5 minor leaguers for sure.
It's interesting looking at the board. So as far as prospectus and how they're ranking players, he's appearing like as a 55 overall. Do you think that's low for Ford?
Yeah, 100%. I don't pay as much attention to the OFP ratings because I don't know exactly what makes a 55 OFP 55 catcher for BP. Unless they truly define every element of it, it doesn't mean that much to me, especially fantasy wise, because they're talking about fantasy and real life. And I'm not thinking about Ford's defense other than his ability to stick at that particular position over time. But it was interesting. I think with that particular write-up, if we're just going to comment about it, you and I had talked about this previously. They talked about Ford as if he was elite, right? The whole write-up just raved about him. And then he had an OFP 55. And so my question for them would be, why did you talk about him in such a glowing way if he's only an OFP 55 for you? To me, he could be anything from a pretty good fantasy catcher to a, like a 6, 7, 8-time All-Star. I think he has that kind of talent. So no, I don't think if I was putting an OFP rating on him, I'd say OFP 60 probably. But his risk is still high for me because I don't know if he's going to stick at catcher. Other players on your list from 31 to 40. Brett Beatty, what happens to him with Correa signing with the Mets or potentially signing with the Mets? What would you do?
I would trade him, and I would wait for he's going to be in a position to be a little heads above other players in the minors at the start of the year. I would let him get a hot start and then flip him for somebody. I don't see much of a future for him there unless he moves to a corner outfield position. But it's, yeah, so you have Alonso at first. Who knows what's going to happen with the Correa situation, but it seems like they're going to work it out. So
I think they'll work it out, honestly. I do think they'll work it out.
Yeah, so I would just, if I were the Mets, I would just kind of stay calm and say he's part of the future because I don't want to undersell him when it comes to his value.
Right.
But I would let him get that, hope for a hot start in the minors and then flip him at that point.
What would you trade him for at first glance?
That's a good question.
I have roster resource up right now with the Mets. And when I look, they've got Mark Canha starting in left field. He's almost 34 years old. They've got Starling Marte in right field, who is 34 years old. And they just signed Nimmo to a long-term contract. I think he's got the kind of bat where I would err on the side of keeping him, just because I think if he becomes even a slightly above average corner outfield bat, I think that's great, right? And he has more value to us fantasy wise at third, but I think he has just as much value to the Mets if he's able to get close to his potential as a left-handed bat. I also, if I was to trade him, I asked the question because if I was to trade him, I would trade him for a couple of pitching prospects or an elite pitching prospect, just because Verlander is 40 and Scherzer is 38, and then you still have Carrasco and Quintana who are 33 and 35, and Senga is the other pitcher in their rotation. So they need pitching prospects quickly if they're going to continue, unless they're just going to continue to spend more money, because they don't have a ton of high-end pitching prospects down in the pipeline. Yeah, interesting bat. Last year he hit 310, 410, 943 with 19 home runs and 362 at-bats. Doesn't take walks as much as I'd like. He's at 49 walks and 362 at-bats, and he does strike out quite a bit. But I have his risk as low. I think he is at minimum an average bat at third base and an average bat in a corner, with the potential to be better than that. Two pitchers you had ranked.
Player.
What's that?
He's a high floor player for me.
Yes, very
And
much
I
so.
would say he does hit it hard too, right? So his slug was over 500 and
Mm-hmm.
36 hard hit rate. So
So two pitchers you had in 31 through 40 were Gavin Williams and Taj Bradley. What
yes,
is it you
Bobby
like
Miller
about
as
those
well.
two?
Mhm. Yes, Gregory's he's starting to really like online games
Yeah.
and doing Minecraft with friends, and he
Uh-huh.
doesn't like doing it alone. So I actually gave him a long talk about fantasy baseball yesterday, saying, "Hey, I do stuff with friends online too."
Oh, nice.
So
That's
so
awesome.
he was just curious as far as what we were doing right here.
Right on.
Yeah, so
Taj
Gavin
Bradley,
Williams,
Gavin
Bobby
Williams.
Miller, and Taj Bradley, I had them all grouped together. Williams, I can't say enough about the Cleveland situation there as far as the org, how they develop pitchers. There's questions as far as beyond his two pitches, whether he could develop a third. I like his makeup. He's 6'6", 255. I like the bigger picture pitchers. I like that you could have some extension there. He was at a 34% K rate, 9% walk rate, which is elite. His home runs under 2%, right around 2% in the minors. So I could see him as somebody that Cleveland will develop further. Bobby Miller, there's proximity there, but the proximity was kind of hurt when it came to the Noah signing, the Thor signing. But I could see the Dodgers creatively using him. There's questions as far as the walks. He had some blow up moments last year when it came to control, but I still see him as potentially a 3 or 2 starter for the Dodgers in the future. There's the whole debate with between him and Stone. I have Stone in the between 50 and 60, but again, I do like the bigger pitchers. So Miller 6'5", 220. I think he has stamina in the future. Taj Bradley, I love. He has the best control of any pitcher on my top 50. With 6% walk rate. His K rate was high as well, so he's not just a control pitcher, 25% K rate. I could see Tampa developing him quite well as well. They will all be conservative with him with his innings, but I could see him as being just another ace coming up in the bullpen in the future.
Mm-hmm. So
I mean, in the starting rotation. Sorry.
yes. So I have Bradley at 25, Williams at 28. I'm low man on Miller. I've got him all the way down at 86. To me, he screams bullpen. I know how great his stuff is, but I don't watching him, he doesn't really have any idea where the pitch is going. And that makes me super nervous. I also think if the Dodgers haven't got him locked in yet, as far as command goes, or even control, who's going to, right? He's 23. He doesn't have mileage on his arm, but he definitely, threw 112 innings last year. The reason Gavin Williams doesn't have quite the same broad repertoire that Miller does, because Miller has a number of pitches. Gavin Williams' fastball slider combination is phenomenal. He does have a curveball and he does have a little bit of a change. But I trust Cleveland to develop pitchers as much as I trust the Dodgers. And Williams has displayed quite a bit more command. He walked 40 in 115 innings, but his whip was 0.95. He had a 1.96 ERA last year in high A and double A. He's a late first round pick out of East Carolina a couple years ago. The one question I watched a ton of film on Gavin Williams just because I rostered him for the majority of the year last year. My question is, so I have questions in one, I'll bring it up here. Questions about players in the right-hand corner of my spreadsheet. And the one thing that I have written for Gavin Williams it's right here. I said, is he a horse or is he great? Right. And I think that's the question I have. So he's at 28 right now. So I'm kind of hedging with Gavin Williams, but he's got the body and the stuff to be 180, 200 inning pitcher with
Yes. Mhm.
180 to 200 strikeouts, right? That's what we see. Is his whip going to be, 1.05, or is it going to be 1.2? Right?
Mhm.
Is he so is he going to be Logan Gilbert with the 1.2 whip or 1.15 whip and be very good, but as fantasy like SP3? Or is he have ace stuff to be an SP1? That third pitch needs to get developed a little bit more for me. I don't know if the fastball and slider are 8 pitches, are double
Mhm.
plus, right? I think that they're plus currently. So, but I like him a lot. Taj Bradley is super
Where,
interesting. Go
where,
ahead.
where do you see Williams as far as proximity? When do you see him coming up?
I think he could start in rotation next year. He had enough double A. Let me see. I have it right here. Let me see how many double A innings he pitched last year. But I think Gavin Williams is 23 years old. He pitched in double A last year. He's got, obviously, we talked about how big he is. Um, he threw 70 of his 115 innings were in double A.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that you could see Gavin Williams start 23 in the Cleveland rotation. He'd be a pitcher for me. I wouldn't even put him in a minor spot. I might take him as I might take 2 pitchers potentially for SP6, SP7 spot and figure out who's the best one. But Gavin Williams would be one of those two. I value him pretty highly. Uh Taj Bradley, fastball, cutter, changeup. Super, super interesting mix of pitches. I have the same question about him. Is he great, or is he very, very good? Uh it's a mix that we don't see a ton of, right? The cutter is his best pitch, I think, in my opinion. And
Mhm.
if you think about how the pitches move, like you've got a fastball that's pretty straight, you've got a cutter that moves slightly this way, and then you have a changeup that moves slightly that way. And they're varying speeds. But I guess this is mostly a nod to the Tampa organization and to Taj Bradley's athleticism. He's a very, very good athlete. He reminds me a bit of not. I hate to make comps that are same race, but he reminds me a bit of Taiwan Walker coming up, because Walker didn't have a very good slider, so he became fastball, cutter, change.
Mhm.
Um,
And he has a control to control it within the zone as well. So
Very much so.
I don't see him getting hit hard at all.
And Tampa is not afraid to play. If they believe a pitcher is ready to go, they're not afraid to throw him in there. So I do think he has opportunity this year. Um, his delivery is almost so smooth for me that I wonder how elite he is. That might not be fair, but I do have him at 25. He is slightly above Waldachuk and Gavin Williams for me. Um, so my 40 through 31, stop me if you want to talk about any of these guys. At 40, Marco Luciano, uh, 39, Harry Ford, 38, Lazaro Montes, the first base corner outfield prospect for the Mariners, 18 years old. 37, Edwin Arroyo. I think we talked about him last episode a bit. 36, Harleen Susana, right-handed starting pitcher for the Washington Nationals organization that was in the Juan Soto trade. 35, Drew Jones. 34, Ricky Tiedemann. 33, Elijah Green. 32, Jackson Merrill. And I know one that a lot of people won't like, but I still believe in him. 31, Kumar Rocker.
Okay. So I think the first one to talk about would be Luciano. And then also
I can share a screen if you want to see it again.
yeah, so Luciano has jumped up and down my boards, and he's a big question for me. So I'd like to hear your analysis there.
Uh, so he lost a year of development. He ended the year in high A. Um, he is. I love his power. I love his swing. Uh, I think I see him as a potential 30 to 35 home run third baseman. But we already know that there are questions if he can even stick at third, that he might be a corner outfielder. He's not a high hit tool guy. He's kind of a power over hit guy, and he doesn't provide any speed. So it's not a knock. When I rank him there, it's not a knock on Luciano as much as it is, you know, I personally want some speed at every position. And if you have no speed and your hit tool is the big question mark with your approach and your skills, those are two pretty big strikes against you, right? So he could still end up being a 250 hitter with 35 home runs and a huge asset at third base. Would not surprise me one bit. That's why I have him ranked at 40. But even if he reaches his potential, like his 90th percentile, he's still not a great player fantasy wise. He's a great real life player because steals are valued more in fantasy than real life. But he had 0 steals last year in 227 at bats in 65 games in rookie ball and high A. That's scary to me, right? If I know going in that I have a keeper, my third baseman is going to give me 0 steals, and I know that for a fact, that's a big deficit to work out of, in team building. And that's part of why I see him there. That's part of why he was expendable for me. But do I love his power? Do I love him as a player? Do I really want him to succeed? Absolutely.
Do you think he has some of the Marte syndrome as far as so sometimes it, like in big moments he hits, right? So he was called up to Double-A end of last year, right, in the playoffs, and he hit. But at other times he just kind of looks bored, right? So in some ways I look at his numbers outside of the skills, kind of the main surface numbers, and I really don't hold that too much against him just because of the injuries, and Eugene was kind of weird last year, the cold weather there. So yeah. So
I agree with all of those things. And I also think that, we don't know what we talked about this a little bit. You have international prospects, specifically from the Dominican, who you don't know what their diet was. You don't know what their childhood experience was to get them to the States. And it's going to be a cultural and personal adjustment, right? And American born players, it's not quite the same. You're still in the United States. You're still eating the same foods or have access to similar foods that you did as a kid, right? Your families are usually in closer proximity, and there's a very good chance that you come from a higher socioeconomic background. So we're talking about rankings here, but I do think that sometimes there are going to be prospects, minor league prospects from other places who are going to be a slower burn. And you're going to have to not look at the stat line as much as look at the actual skills. Go look at film, right? Watch. Luciano's got a beautiful swing, right? He's an incredible athlete. You watch him and you really can see 35 home runs. And that's why I don't care that what he did in Eugene last year. I really don't. The concern for me is the hit tool and the speed, which are skills. And I'm not basing that on the stats. I'm basing that on what I think his skill set is. And it's also, when you apply that to Marte, I think that Marte is the same thing. I did talk about Marte's boredom a little bit, and I think Luciano expected to be a major leaguer by now. But yeah, I think there's some boredom. I think that Marte is, if you watch him hit, and you'll see when I have him where I have him ranked, you'll see what I think. But I think they're both very, very good players. I would love for either of them to be on the Mariners, but I have Marte above Luciano for a number of reasons, fantasy wise. But your what do you call it, Marte syndrome?
Yes.
I think there's some truth to that. Yes, very much so. Let's see here. Lazaro Montes, we said we would talk about him a bit.
Yeah, and we talked about him last time as well, but
you're right. So he's just to recap, he's a very high ceiling power player, left-handed swing, big guy, I believe he's 6'3", 6'4", incredible athlete, 18 years old, has 40 home run potential. He has I think a current, kind of 7 raw, maybe even 7.5 raw, and 60 in game. He's a beast. So
you see him at first eventually?
Probably, Probably. I think unless he leans down or leans out a little bit or doesn't gain a ton of weight, probably a first baseman. But the other great thing about him is he's got better bat to ball than I think you would expect from a power hitter, an 18-year-old power hitter. Let's
Who did you
see.
have? You had read your 31 through 35 again.
We talked about Edwin Arroyo as well, right? I think last
Yeah.
episode.
Mm-hmm.
Harleen Susana. We'll take the pitchers first. So I have Susana, Ricky Tiedemann, and Kumar Rocker.
Okay. Yeah, talk about those three because you have Tiedemann pretty
Lower.
low compared to other boards. So I think
I
that'd be a
do.
good
So
discuss.
Susana is just another 100-mile-an-hour, slider guy. Big kid, big international signing, was a major part of the Soto trade. I don't trust the Nationals' ability to develop pitchers at all. I did rank him pretty high. I think his stuff is special, and he's a wait and see, but I'm betting on him, ranking him this high. Obviously, third pitch development and not getting hurt are going to be the things that you're going to want to look for with him. I have Tiedemann at 34. I don't know if it's just prospect fatigue, hearing his name so much as a hot name last year. I do downgrade him slightly, potentially pitching in Toronto. I just think that the combination of their defense, pitching on turf, and um and pitching in a stadium where it's easier to hit home runs is a strike against a pitching prospect. Toronto also, I think Manoah was a great pitcher, but they've kind of blew it with some pitching prospects as well. So I don't necessarily trust them totally, but he's got, a beautiful, like high 90s fastball, kind of similar profile to Harrison, like we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Pitches up in the zone with the fastball, down in the zone with the slider, and he does have a changeup that does play.
Mm-hmm.
200 strikeout, 200 inning potential in Ricky Tiedemann. Question will be, does he continue to develop his command? And then Kumar Rocker, everyone's down on.
Just a comment on Tiedemann. He did
Yeah,
have a 1% home run rate, which was quite low.
right. Which if you think it's going to regress to the mean at all, his statistics aren't quite what you saw from him last year. I did watch, he and Harrison matched up in Double-A towards the end of the year, and that was really fun to watch. That's a game to go back and watch if you have the time.
It is funny comparing the two together with the analytics because they're very similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Harrison 36K rates, Tiedemann 35, Tiedemann 10% walk rate, Harrison 11%. So if you just look across the board, Harrison was a little higher in the home run rate, but obviously that's going to be very different when he pitches in San Francisco.
Right. So comparing the two, I rostered the two for quite a while, and I still roster Harrison. And when I compared the two, the reason for the difference in ranking for me is that Harrison I like his delivery a little more. He's slightly smaller than Tiedemann, but I like his delivery more. And I have to say that's the difference for me between a pitching prospect for the San Francisco Giants and the Toronto Blue Jays. I believe in the Giants' ability to get the most out of their pitchers. And if you're going in with similar stuff and similar age, give me the Giants prospects, 10 out of 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
The last one is Kumar Rocker. I'm certainly highest on him compared to everyone else. I don't quite know why people have soured on him so much. I think he's gotten a lot of negative publicity, an undeserved negative publicity. I don't even know if it's intentionally negative, but people have talked about him as just a run-of-the-mill guy. Mm-hmm. And he's not even in the top 10 of, who was it? I was listening to a prospect podcast yesterday. He's not even their top 10. He's their number 11. What I will say is, do we know prospects better, or do major league organizations know prospects better?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, yes, we know some,
right?
And it's fun for us, but we don't know better than the Texas Rangers, and they picked him third.
Yeah.
Right. So there's more there. The other thing is, he was a potential number one pick going into the 2021 college season.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't just discard that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know. I love him. I love his competitiveness. I think that pitching in Texas is a plus for a pitcher now. He's got good defense up the middle behind him if he's up in Texas, and fastball slider plays.
Uh-huh.
It just does. So is it a bet on his talent? Yes, but that's my prospect rankings are always going to be a bet on the most talented player, taking
Mm-hmm.
into account things like proximity and health. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not ranking, Owen White over Kumar Rocker. I'm not ranking Cole Winn. They rank Cole Winn over him.
Oh, wow.
Like, I'm not ranking Cole Winn over Kumar Rocker. I'm sorry, I'm not. There's a reason why he went 10th to the Mets in 21, and there's a reason why he went third to the
Mm-hmm.
Rangers in 22. These are
There's something about system too, besides the player development coaches. There's the mix of veterans with youth as well. So
totally.
I like that situation. What Verlander did with his friendship with Hunter Brown last year was, I think that increased Hunter Brown's performance and ultimate value. Same thing here. Rocker's going to be with some veteran pitchers that can show him the ropes more or less.
Well, so, and if he's fastball slider and trying to like make sure his third pitch is a viable pitch, he's going to be surrounded by Jacob deGrom, John Gray, and his friend from college, Jack Leiter, eventually, right? You're talking about all fastball slider guys, all guys who, are either developing or have tried to develop a third pitch. And there's a lot of baseball intelligence there, right? So I think he's surrounded by the right things. And
Mhm.
if you just look at, so I don't love Pipeline all the time, but if you look at Pipeline has 60 fastball, 60 curveball, 70 slider, 50 control.
Yeah.
If you take that in a 6'5", 245-pound athlete, and you've
Uh-huh.
got that kind of stuff surrounded by those types of pitchers in a big park, in a division that's not quite outstanding, I think you have the makings of, at minimum, a high inning, high strikeout number 3 starter.
Mm-hmm.
I just with the potential for elite.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. People are just, I don't know what it is about Kumar Rocker that has people so down on him, but he's not even in top tens.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of crazy to me. Uh,
One other one that I wanted to mention that was between 30 and 40 with me would be Emmanuel Rodriguez.
sure.
As I said, I think he could be in the top 10 by the end of the year. You like the walk rates, right? So before he got hurt, I think maybe he had 200 at bats, but his walk rate was 28%, right?
Mhm.
Very elite. His hard hit rate is the highest of any on the board. Again, it's not a good we're talking about not a good sample size, but still he was hitting the crap out of the ball before he got hurt. And his
Mhm.
contact is, around 75%. He does have smaller stature. He's 5'10", 210, but he's a spark plug out there. So, and the way Minnesota develops hitting with their hitters, I could see him easily moving up the board quite a bit.
They're they were kind of at the forefront of the increased launch angle. And he's got that kind of power where, he could be a 30, 35 home run guy. He's 19 years old. Yeah, just pure stats wise, he had 9 home runs and 11 steals in 47 games. Right? That's a pretty athletic, high potential player. I have him at 76 mostly just because he's 19.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to see the high walk rate, but I get a little queasy with walk rate that translating to the majors when you're looking at it that young and at that low of a level. But I agree. Would it surprise me for him to be top 10, top 25 by the end of the year? Slightly, but not really. Uh so Drew Jones, Elijah Green, and then I have Jackson Merrill here as well.
Well,
Uh
let's talk Merrill because Merrill has jumped up boards quite a bit. I have Merrill at 25, so we're pretty close there.
sure. Um I think so. I do think he's a true shortstop. I think he stays a shortstop. I know he's 6'3". Um, he's playing on a team now with Tatis in center, and Bogart's obviously at short for now. But if we all think Machado's gone at the end of the year. If Bogaerts moves to third, then you've got a spot for Merrill in a year or two. Left-handed bat, really nice swing. I don't know that I see totally elite from him. Is he a 30 home run hitter? I don't think so. Interestingly, he's got some of the, when I think of him, I think of Robert Hassel, and it might be because of they were both Padres prospects at one time, but he's a shortstop, not a corner outfielder. And so if you're getting high average 20 home runs, 20 steals at shortstop over the next 8 years, you'll take it all day long, right? And in that offense, you're looking at potential 80 to 100 runs and RBIs if you're hitting in the right spot. What do you think about Jackson Merrill?
Same thing. I see high floor and potentially a decent ceiling there as well. And just the reports on the ground from AFL, he was hitting the crap out of the ball with high contact, right? And then his performance in the minors last year support that, right? So he's 81% contact rate, 36% hard hit rate, over 500 slug. And the question marks have always been about his power, right? Contact was his strength, but the power is coming into play now. So I could see him jumping into the top 20 quite easily.
I also like the idea of, if you have a shortstop who's skilled, I'd rather have a shortstop who's skilled move to second or third than have a third baseman who's skilled who has to move to a corner like a Brett Beatty. So I think that's the difference between Beatty has a little more power currently, but it's also because he's older. But Merrill is a prospect with the up arrow for me. I am at 32 right now, and I could see him going slightly higher. Like you said, I don't know that I see the ceiling, quite the ceiling as some other players. But if you tell me that his floor is 18 or 20 at short, man, that's with a good hit tool, that's a top 30 player for me, or top 30 prospect for me. Let's cover Elijah Green and Drew Jones real quick before the break. We got about 2 minutes left. I want to love Elijah Green more than anything. Son of former Pittsburgh Steelers tight end Eric Green, big athlete, 6'3", 225, might be the fastest player in the draft and the strongest player in the draft. Swing and miss is the only real question. Hits the ball incredibly hard. Is going to either stick in center or play right field. Tremendous power. I'd say double plus power, double plus speed. But again, right-handed. Is he going to have too much swing and miss? We don't know yet. That's a wait and see, but his talent is so elite that he had to be in the top 40 from me. You have an opinion about Green?
Well, I want to ask you a question here, since in my dynasty league, I picked number 3 in the first year player draft. So I'm thinking about this a lot. So you have Green, you have Jones, and then you have Johnson,
Holiday.
You have and then you have your guy Collier, right?
Collier.
So where do you place Green if you were doing a first year player draft? Where would you place him as far as and you have
well, I'll talk about Jones real quick too, because he's a part of this conversation. I think Drew Jones is, if his name wasn't Drew Jones and he didn't play in elite center field, I don't know that he would be seen nearly as highly as he is. I think Jones would be at the bottom. Green would be next. I'd probably have some combination of Holiday, Tremar, and Collier at the top. A lot of that is positionality, right? I think you're talking about second base, shortstop, and third base, and I want elite offense at that position before I take an outfielder. And Tremar has the best hit tool. I think Collier has the best combination power hit, without speed. And then Holiday gives you a nice balance, kind of a Jackson Merrill type profile at short. So for me, it would be either Tremar or Collier first. The other one second, Holiday third, Green fourth, Drew Jones fifth.
Yeah, I feel that.
You were in your feelings just now. What were you saying?
I was just saying I would place something similar. I think I think Green has the highest ceiling, but he is the highest risk out of those five. So I place him four. I would even maybe think of placing him five because of that. And his K rate's a big concern. When he came up, he did have limited at bats, but he's walking decently. He showed power, but he was striking out about 50% of the time. So want to see how the Nats do with that. If it was a different organization, I'd be a little more confident as far as that goes. But we'll see if they switch up their player development this year.
It's really hard. It's really hard to fully embrace any hitting prospect who has that level of swing and miss, or that level of that lacking of pitch recognition. It's brutal, right? And so we all see the talent, we all see the skill set, we all see the potential. But if you have limited spots and limited resources to invest, are you taking? He's a lottery ticket, really, at this point in time. Do you have a comment on Drew Jones?
I just want to. I think I have the same caution there. There's the plus as far as him having the pedigree, right? But there's the plus of what we saw him coming in, his hard hit. He appears to have decent plate discipline, but I just want to see him against different competition, and it was unfortunate that we weren't able to see that last year.
Right. And I don't know that there's any rush to get him up either. He's a slow burn. You're going to have to wait 4 years to see him in the majors between his injury and the outfield prospects that they already have. I just think it's going to be a while with Drew Jones. And again, I think there is some name recognition and some acknowledgement of him playing a 7 center field that elevates his dynasty fantasy ranking, even though we all should know that defense in real life doesn't apply, right? That we're looking strictly at offensive statistics. All right, 30 through 21. Why don't you start?
So I got Connor Norby at 30, second base for Baltimore. Josh Young, third base for Texas at 29. I have Luciano.
Also 29. I also have Young at 29. That's funny.
Okay. And then Luciano at 28. We already discussed him. Here's the shocker. Ellie De La Cruz at 27. We already talked about Drew Jones. I have him at 26. We talked about Jackson Merrill at 25. I have Termar Johnson at 24. Andy Rodriguez at 23. So I guess I do have one other catcher ahead of Ford here, between Ford and Alvarez. And I moved up Astoria Ruiz to 22, and then I have Tovar at 21.
Oof. All right, there's a little bit to unpack here.
Yeah.
Let's start. Why don't you start one by one at the bottom again?
Okay, Norby at 30.
So, okay, let's start there. Obviously, you're pretty high on Connor Norby. What is it you see?
I see a balance between hit and power there. He made some adjustments towards the end of the year last year, which brought about phenomenal results. Usually if you see an uptick, you always have to ask the question if it's just the ups and downs, or if there's something that happened. And there is definitely something that happened with swing adjustments there at the end. He has a great hard hit. He's maybe 76, 77 on contact rate, walk rate around 10. But with that skill set at second base, I would take that any day. So he's here because he's the future second baseman for the Baltimore Orioles. If he was third base, he'd be towards the end of the top 100.
I like Connor Norby too. I had him at 62. If I was to kind of make a counter argument, I would say that he is a right-handed hitter hitting for power in Baltimore. And we know that Baltimore suppresses right-handed power now.
Mhm.
He's also, he's 5'10", he's a smaller guy. Uh, they have enough talent on that team. You wonder where he hits in that lineup, right? Is he just their number 7 hitter for the next 6 years? I also think that Jordan Westberg is competition for him. And so we're not really sure of him. Westberg, Norby, Holiday, Gunner, Kobe Mayo. There's a number of players in that organization that I think are competing with each other for at bats. And I like Norby the best out of the ones who are coming currently, besides Gunner, but I do wonder about that at times. So, but if he has the opportunity, right? If we're looking at a 500 plate appearance, 550 plate appearance, regular second baseman for Baltimore, and we think he's going to hit for some power and draw some walks.
Mhm.
Here's what I have as my preliminary top 10 second baseman going into 23 in the major leagues. I've got Simeon at 1, Altuve at 2. Then the next tier is Albies at 3, Jimenez at 4, Chisholm at 5, right? And if we're thinking Norby at like 85% his potential, 90%, then I've got Ketel Marte. Third tier is Ketel Marte, Jorge Polanco, Trevor Story, Brandon Lau. He fits in that group, right?
Mhm.
As a 20 to 25 home run guy.
Mhm.
So while I worry about him having opportunity, second base is so shallow
Mhm.
that if he can hit for some power and have that many at bats as a right-handed hitter, man,
Mhm.
I see it. So I
And
might.
that's why I coupled him with Young. I kind of see him as a top 10 within his position, but not a top 5. Same thing with Young, a top 10 within his position, but probably not a top 5.
I like it. I like it. I'm not as high on Norby as you are, but I see the line of thought, and I do think it's important for us to challenge ourselves to think about position and depth at that position when we're making these dynasty rankings. If it's just purely a Major League Baseball ranking for prospects, Norby's probably going to be lower. But within this context, what you have at second base right now and what he has the potential to do, I do think that ranking him as highly as you have is justified for sure. Who do you have next
Um,
to talk about?
the controversial one, the De La Cruz, right? Ellie. So I love him. I root for him. I love his skills. I I think he has power and speed. Even Forecaster had him at 67% above power, 42% above speed when he comes in this, if he does come in mid-season. But what scares me and why I downgraded it is the contact rate, right? 65 to 66%. And that's similar with Cowser. But if we go back to Cowser, I'm not making a comp or comparison, but I'm just looking at these two categories. If we look at Cowser, he has the same strikeout rate, but his walk rate's at 15%, right? And Ellie is not a walker. So how, you know, how are we going to explain any success when it comes to hit? And even looking at comps of prior players, there's not a lot of successful hitters in the MLB who have done well with a contact rate well under 70. I did check out Joey Gallo just out of curiosity. His contact rate in the minors was about 60%, but he has the walk thing going for him as well, right? So that always upped his OPS. So I have OPS concerns about Ellie, and also on base concerns when it comes to the using his speed.
I've got a pretty big down arrow with him. I actually have him at 4 when I made this list. I think his physical tools are undeniable, and the numbers he put up last year are undeniable.
Mm-hmm.
Your point is well taken about his contact percentage. And okay, so I look at him and I see a player, as you said, that doesn't walk, and has tremendous swing and miss. What is the incentive of a major league pitcher to actually throw him a strike? If you're a major league pitcher, why would you ever throw Ellie De La Cruz a strike? You just wouldn't, right? You would be all over the zone all the time, high, low, outside, inside, because if you throw him a strike, there's a good chance he's going to hit it hard, but he's going to chase everything, right? The other reason to downgrade him is he's essentially a corner outfielder, the way that the Reds are building their organization. He's not, Arroyo is going to be their shortstop as long as he continues to hit. Marte, they're already putting at third base to kind of groom him to be there. And De La Cruz is fantasy wise is an outfielder, right? Probably. So I think he's the most extreme high risk prospect, even though he produced last year, that I can find on this list.
He's certainly, to give him credit, he's the highest ceiling on my board
for sure,
by far.
For sure.
And I like him. I hope he proves me wrong, because I like him a lot. And he does have the park factor there that will help, and that young lineup that's going to mature together is going to be interesting to watch too.
Re-ranking, I would probably have him. I'd probably have him either at the bottom of the top 10 or somewhere between like 11 and 15, right? Somewhere between, say, 8 and 15. But I don't know, maybe it's just being out of the season a little more, looking at numbers, thinking more about what I value as a prospect evaluator. When you have that much swing and miss without the ability to take a walk, it just makes it really difficult to succeed in the major leagues with that particular profile. I don't know if I'm ready to rank him as low as you did, but I see why. And if I rostered him, I would be trying to trade him pretty quickly if I could. I think this is the sell high moment for Ellie De La Cruz.
You can get a lot for him too.
What was that?
You could get tons for him too in a dynasty.
100% you could. I think out of 16 teams, you could find probably 6 to 8 who would still be willing to pay top dollar for him. Who else did you have on your 21 through 30?
Many of whom we've talked about. I know Termar is going to come up later.
Sure. We can talk about him later.
And Andy Rodriguez, we haven't talked about. And then Ruiz, I moved up as well, post A's trade.
So quickly, Andy Rodriguez, catcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Why do you have him this high?
He just performed last year, and he has that, and he's not like a pop-up player either, right? So he had the pedigree. He's one of the top performers last year. He has the great combination of power and contact. He's 78% contact rate. He takes walks. He's 11 to 12% walk rate. 590 slugging percentage, almost at 600.
Can't argue that.
In the higher levels as well. So yeah, I love him as a catcher. I think it's really interesting that he's become the number one catcher right after the number one pick has kind of faltered, right? Davis, he'll be up as well. Maybe I'm interested to see how they're going to play both, and where each is going to play. But yeah, he's just a hitter, and I love that. So yeah, that's where I have him.
Awesome. So Andy Rodriguez, and then what was the other one?
Esteury Ruiz at 22.
Okay, so obviously that's pretty high for Ruiz. What is it that you see with him?
So he's an interesting one, right? He's one that's debated a lot. People really don't know what to do with him. They know a little more now that he's going to get playing time, right? So you have people having him at the bottom of the 100. Then you have somebody that's very bullish on him, like Prospectus, that I think has him like at 30 or so. But what I like about him is, number one, he did have a breakout year last year, and that is supported by significant swing changes, right? He comes to, and I'm taking this from from, I'm not an expert on swings, but I'm taking this from eyes to the ground who have seen him. He seems to already come loaded when he comes to the plate as far as his stance goes, just ready to uncoil, quicker bat. And that has affected the way he's making contact with his shift rules and with his speed. I don't care if his hard hit's under 30. With that contact rate that he now has, it's very doable with his speed. And if you look at just his performance last year, I think there needs to be a nod to that as well, right? So his on base percentage was over 400. His slugging percentage was over 500. His speed, now that he only had 34 at bats. This is the other thing that bothers me about sites ranking him. They're analyzing his 34 MLB at bats. Crap, he didn't have a chance in San Diego nor in Milwaukee, right? And it's unfair to say, oh, well, he had a low hard hit rate in the majors with 34 at bats, right? So anyway, elite speed, he's up there in the top 10, even with those 34 at bats as far as his speed. I think it was between 29 and 30. And most are having him between 70 and 80 with speed. But the other thing with speed, it's not just athletic speed. He was always known for being a great base runner. So that's an important factor as well. So with the new change of rules, some including Fantrax, some leagues have him still having the second base eligibility because that's how he came up, and he hasn't established enough at bats in MLB. So that's helpful as well. So yeah, I'm high on him. And I think both in keeper and in non-keeper leagues, he definitely should be drafted with the new steal rules.
So I agree. A couple of thoughts on Ruiz from me. I had him at 68 prior to the trade to Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
I would elevate him after the trade because he is one. Oakland is a shitty team, and he's gonna get opportunity with Oakland, right? We know that for a fact. Like, he is going to get opportunity because he's going to a worse team. Also, he was the centerpiece of that trade for Oakland, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oakland trades Sean Murphy away, their cornerstone catcher, and Ruiz was the most highlighted player in that trade. Yes, they got Mueller back. Yes, they got some arms back, but Ruiz was the one who they really wanted. And he was the one they wanted over William Contreras.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to play him, right? They're going to give him opportunity. They saw something in him. The other big thing, so you highlighted his numbers. Obviously, he's an eight speed, 85 steals last year between double and triple A. Like, he's got speed to burn. He also had 16 home runs. And so if you take, you understanding or acknowledging that some minor league parks play smaller, he's going to Oakland. If he has the ability to hurt a middle fastball or a hanging slider, that's all he needs for pitchers to not, we talked about it earlier with hitters that don't have the ability to hit the ball out, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get challenged. And I think with Ruiz, you can't necessarily challenge him in that same way because he has just enough power to be able to punish a bad pitch. He also fast enough that he can get on base with the bad pitch, right? So I love it. I do think he's a prime example of a better fantasy player than a real life player. I don't know that he'll have tremendous impact on the athletics ability to become a better team. But fantasy wise, he has legitimate 50 steal, 10 home run potential next year.
Mm-hmm.
What is like where do you draft a 50 steal, 10 home run outfielder right now? Pretty high, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is with the decent average, probably low end outfield 2, high end outfield 3.
Mm-hmm.
In a perfect world, probably an outfield 3, but that's super valuable. So I don't know. I agree with you. I think that we get so caught up in focusing on what a player can't do. And unless what he can't do impacts everything else in the profile, I don't think that's fair, right? And I don't think that his lack of real home run power
Mhm.
impacts whether he's going to steal bases or not, because he has just enough power to have extra base hits or hit a few of them out. I don't know. I
Mm.
like him a lot. I'm excited to see. I love players like this. These are players of our from our childhood generation with that kind of
And
speed.
what's interesting about him, looking at the speed history here with players coming up, right? So you had Billy Hamilton. Hamilton wasn't known for either contact or walk rate, right? Gordon, same way, D. Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then even more recently, somebody who stole close to 100. I think Straw was pretty high in steals with Houston, but still very low. He was contact, but very low walk rate.
Yep.
But you have Ruiz at 14, 15% walk rate. That's exactly what you want from a
Right.
speedster. Yeah.
All right. So I'll do my 30 through 21. Um, 30. So this will be a fun conversation. 30, I have Christian Hernandez, shortstop, Chicago Cubs, 18 years old. 29, Josh Young, third baseman, Texas. 28, Gavin Williams. 27, Ken Waldachuk. 26, Brent Beatty. 25, Taj Bradley. 24, Royce Lewis, shortstop, Minnesota Twins. 23, Miguel Vargas. 22, James Wood. And 21, Robert Hassel III. The ones we talked about, Young, Gavin, Waldachuk, Beatty, Bradley, Vargas, we can bypass. Christian Hernandez. I'm sure I'm high man on Christian Hernandez as well. Let's revisit. I don't know if we did it online or offline, the conversation we had about Christian Hernandez a couple months ago.
Oh yeah.
So I have him as ETA 2025. He didn't play above rookie ball last year. He is a 6'2" shortstop. He was signed in January of 21 for $3 million out of the Dominican. The immediate comp was A-Rod. I think that's a lazy one, but uber talented player, right? Real a plus hit tool, plus power with the potential for even more because he hasn't filled out yet. I'd say average to plus speed, is going to stick at shortstop, has that kind of athleticism, and he's 18. And so he was kind of the darling of the ball with prospect conversations heading into the 22 season. You saw him in some top 100s. Everyone said keep an eye on him. In 157 at-bats last year in rookie ball, he hit 261, 320, 677, which is not great. But how do you go from him being a top 100 prospect or even a top 50 prospect on some rankings to being off the board, right? If he completely shot the bed when you're watching him and you didn't see anything in his swing, or his swing changed, or he got fat, right? Like that's one thing, but none of those happened with him. I still have I have his risk as mid. I don't even have his risk as high as an 18-year-old. So is it why is it that we see a prospect like Christian Hernandez all of a sudden drop, even though he didn't really do anything to do it?
Yeah, I agree. It's weird because if you I remember the pipeline conversation when they were talking about the big shortstops coming up last year, right? So you had Watson, Volpe, and Lawler. And then Hernandez came into the conversation. And I think Mayo answered that he would put Hernandez's highest ceiling among those four. So it's interesting how he's just all of a sudden disappeared just because of what 127 at bats in rookie ball, as what you said, a player coming over to a brand new situation. I think this is the first time stateside for him, right?
Right.
He's in a great organization that's known for developing players, developing hitters. Yeah, so he's a great buy low now. Even in a dynasty, I would run out and try to grab him right now. He's I think most decent dynasty leagues he's still rostered,
Right.
but he's a deal right now.
I would say I feel the same way about Luciano in that just go watch his swing, right? And not just his swing in the cage, but go watch his swing in the game and watch his stature. Noelvi Marte, same idea. And go tell me they're not top 40 prospects, right? The way he carries himself, what his swing looks like. It's very easy for him, right? The game looks easy for him right now in the same way it looks easy for Marte. And I love those prospects. And I think people sleep on it because they want numbers and they want max effort, right? There are all these things that I think enter scouting that sometimes can cloud your judgment. So for me, he's number 30. Josh Young, we talked about a little bit. He's the starting third baseman in Texas from now until probably for the next 6 years. Big power player, worry a little bit about his strikeouts, but we'll see what happens. He's ranked this high in a lot of ways because of opportunity and because he's going to be in a pretty good offense. Beatty, we talked about. Gavin Williams, Waldichuk, Taj Bradley. So Royce Lewis won't be back for Minnesota until June or July. We just found out. I might downgrade him from 24 because of his injury history now. He was a former number 1 pick of the Minnesota Twins. I think they expected him to be their starting shortstop coming into 2023. Power speed, played really well in the major leagues last year, demonstrated a lot of skill. With health, where would you put Royce Lewis on this list?
With health, he'd be top 50 for me. But again, with this is a second knee issue, right?
I believe it is, yeah.
And how is that going to affect his speed, right? And that's part of his calling card. He had a slow start in the minors, but really has moved forward, right? So he'd be a good comp for saying we shouldn't give up on elite prospects, because he was one of those that did struggle early.
Right.
So my concern chiefly would be that knee issue and losing some of his 5 category potential there.
He would be, because of his name, and he was a number 1 pick. I don't know if you'd be able to buy low with him, but I think if you could get him low right now, he would be a nice pickup. Vargas at 23, we talked about. James Wood. Did we talk about him last episode or no?
We did not talk about him last episode. We talked about him in the top 21, the first one we did.
That's right. Again, James Wood, question is he going to be a corner outfielder or first baseman? 6'7", you worry about the long levers, but he's not shown a propensity to strike out yet. Takes a walks, got speed. Obviously hits for a bunch of power. He's kind of a wait and see, but it's hard not to rank him in the top 25 or 30 given the potential that you see there.
I have him 15.
So. Okay. Yeah, so he's high on both of our lists. 21, Robert Hassel III. 21 years old. We both rostered him last season. Now an outfield prospect for the Washington Nationals, was a part of the Juan Soto trade. I have his risk as low. I expect him to be up with the Nationals at some point in 2023. Very high floor, probably lower ceiling type of player. I said before, I think he's an outfield 3 in fantasy with the potential to be an outfield 2, maybe in his peak years, mostly because I don't see him getting over 25 home runs or 20 steals. And I think those 2 numbers will never match up. Those peaks will never match up, where he'll probably be higher steal, lower power. And as he ages, he'll become higher power, lower steal. Does demonstrate a pretty good eye at the plate, has very good bat to ball skills. I do like his ability to kind of just slap singles into like the opposite field. A fun player to watch. I think probably a player that would be more highly valued 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I guess, better said, than he is now. But still worthy of a top 25 ranking in my mind. What say you about Robert Hassel III?
He's in my top 50. I had him down with Veen and Cowser in that area. But what he has over them is the hit and the eye, right? And he's just a natural hitter if you watch him play. He's a baseball junkie too. He's kind of a one of those that kind of made his rounds last year to all the podcasts, which was kind of cool. Him and Mervis were always going on getting interviewed, talking about swings. But he's basically, he grew up with baseball. I like his attitude. He doesn't necessarily want to change away from the hit, trying to because one of the critiques has been the power issue. Is his power going to develop? And they asked him that question, and he said, well, what concerns me the most is being a hitter. And I think he's going to benefit. He's one of these players, I think, compared to a Veen or Cowser, that's going to benefit from the new rules, right? So he has this above average speed that he'll take advantage of. Unlike maybe Veen, he does have the hit to get on base more with the change in the shifts. And like Veen, he has the on base percentage with the walks to get on base and steal. So I could see him easily getting over 20 steals, 15 home runs, 280 type of outfielder, and a very high floor outfielder 3.
Your quote, he doesn't remind me of the player necessarily, but your quote of him reminds me of like Tony Gwynn's approach, right? It's not as if Tony Gwynn could not hit home runs. Tony Gwynn chose to be the type of hitter that he is. And I think Hassel is a fun player in that regard. I'm excited to see him play. I don't know that I'm going to keep him in our hybrid keeper league. But I really do like Hassel a lot. He's my number 21. So true to form, we've gone almost 2 hours now and we've covered 30 spots. So we'll probably have to go another episode to do 1 through 20.
That'd be fun.
So I ask all the time, maybe it's because I'm excited. What are your thoughts right now about our spring training trip and what are you most excited about?
I'm totally excited about seeing the players live, right? The question is, we're going during the WBC, so there's a little caution there as far as where everybody is going to be. But even that's going to be fun because I think we'll see some more low minor players playing because of that, which is, we won't see necessarily the superstars unless we pay high money for what is it, Chase Field tickets. But I'm really looking forward to getting up and close with players. This is the first time where I'm going to spring training where I think I'm a little more knowledgeable with the minor leagues. So I'll be paying a lot more attention to the minor league players and how they're playing there. What's going to be fun with the league? This is going to be like the first time together with this league, and it's quite a mix of personalities. I think one of our players, Doug, who's been on your podcast, said is kind of MLB should do like a real world show of these middle-aged guys going and renting a house during spring training and drafting, right? So it's gonna be fun just to see the mix of personalities. And the other thing too that's fun too is people have the online personas, but they're very different when you see them live, right?
Totally.
Funny as well. We used to our prior league, there was a guy who did himself Big Woody, and he would be hilarious online, kind of aggressive, making fun of everybody, like the personality online. We went to an A's game with him, and first time we met him, and he's like this nicest, shyest guy.
Right.
And and he unfortunately ended up passing a couple of years later, and that's why we named one of our leagues after him. But it's just fun to see that all these ingredients coming together into a very interesting. I'm stoked. I'm really looking forward to it.
I think our fantasy league is the one and only time I'll ever be called glib my entire life. Usually I'm used to being called an asshole or like the most offensive person in the room, or pushing the envelope. And so it's an example of like how you present online can be completely opposite of who you are in that kind of setting, especially if we're watching baseball, we're drinking, we're eating, we're drafting, we're amongst friends, right? There's no kids around where you have to censor. Like it is going to be really interesting because that never left my mind being called that, because it was so foreign, the idea of being seen that way. I think that it's funny you talk about watching younger players and going to WBC. Maybe it's because I've been to spring training a number of times, but I think to myself, like when I think about the trip, I think about being around baseball and how happy that makes me. But it's not it's funny because I don't think I'm going to scout at all. I don't think I'm going to be looking at, unless somebody truly stands out to me, I'm not really going to be there to scout to see who's good and who's not. I'm there to be with my league mates who I haven't spent that much time with, and to be in Arizona and to be on vacation and almost most importantly, before the scouting and being at games, it's about our fantasy draft, right? That's what the focus is for me, is I want to win. And that's not to knock scouting and seeing the players at all. But it's only to say, when I think about the trip, that's what I think about. I think about the draft. I think about being with these dudes that I spend so much time with online, and being on vacation and not working. And those things are like, I'm over the moon. I'm so pumped to, I hope that it becomes an annual thing. I hope that we're all able to make it an annual thing, both financially and time wise. But we've talked about it for how many years now? Probably since we started playing, essentially. Yeah. And we're finally making it happen this year.
I think over half the league is going too. So
yeah, which is wild.
With the flights. Yeah. And I like the other thing about proximity with players too. I think the players have that connection as well to fans that you don't get at the MLB stadium, where they're so serious, right? Totally. So the one time I went, we were in center field at the Dodgers park, and that's when Andre Ethier, during that generation, and there was a drunk dude out there, and he kept taking his shirt off for Ethier as he was in left field. And Ethier couldn't stop laughing. Like every time he came out, and at one point he had to like duck his head because he was laughing so hard at the guy.
That's awesome.
You get that you get that connection with players that, we're all just human beings and we're having fun with this really cool game.
Right.
That I'm looking forward
to. The last time I went, I remember going to, I've never been, one of the stadiums, probably the stadium I most want to visit in my life is Dodger Stadium. My grandfather was a Dodgers fan. I glorify the Dodgers in a lot of ways, but I've never been to the stadium. And the Dodger Stadium in Arizona is similar in some ways, supposed to be similar to real Dodger Stadium. And I went to see the White Sox, and this is when Moncada was first coming up, and I rostered Moncada everywhere. And I still love Yoel Moncada. And I remember going and I was so excited. I was like, I'm going to see Yoel Moncada at a like bootleg Dodger Stadium. It was a night game. Walking up, I have the most fond memories of that particular night. Remember ending up at In-N-Out Burger afterwards. Like, it was just, that particular evening was one of the most fun nights of my life for a number of reasons. And those are the kinds of memories I think that come from spring training that are very unique and interesting and fun. But yeah, it's top of mind all the time, probably too much right now. This trip to spring training is going to be a freaking blast. All right, so next episode, we'll go from 20 to 1 and maybe cover some of the adjustments we've made on our lists. Sorry to the listeners that it keeps being false advertising, that last time we were going to go 100 to 1. This time we were supposed to go 50 to 1, and we barely made it to prospect number 20. Anything else that you want to add?
I'm not really looking forward to the top 20 list. There's some great players in there. I think this is really a peak year when it comes to prospects. There's not like the Tatis type of prospect, but the top 20 really has I think some players that are high floor that are going to have some impact in the MLB.
Awesome, man. Should be fun. It's good to see you, brother. All right.